When thinking critically about persuasive writing, one of the skills that we need to master is the ability to evaluate the author's arguments to determine whether or not we agree. As we learned in the last lesson, persuasive writing has a purpose. It wants to convince you as the reader to agree with a particular opinion or inspire you to take a particular action. So, you must evaluate that author's argument and decide whether or not you agree with what he or she has to say. You need to judge for yourself whether the author's argument works or not. So, how do we evaluate an argument? Well, that's where a little detective work is going to come in. We need to ask the question, does the author use convincing facts to support his or her opinion? The author will use facts such as statistics, examples, or reasons to try to sway your opinion towards his or her argument. Statistics are pieces of data from a study of a large quantity of numerical data. Okay, that may or may not make sense, but to kind of help you understand, it could be an average, a percentage, or maybe even a total number of something. Examples are specific instances or occurrences that support a point. And finally, reasons are the causes, explanations, or justifications for something. Once again, an author needs to use facts to support opinions. Let's take a look at this particular opinion. The government should do a better job of protecting people's privacy. Do you agree or disagree? Well, we need some context. Evidence is going to be necessary to convince you. In other words, you need facts to determine whether or not you agree with this opinion. A couple of facts that the author could use would include companies that collect your social security number, spending habits, and entertainment choices sell this data for millions of dollars. Or identity thieves have stolen data on thousands of people from these agencies. Both of these statements are true because they can be proven. Now, if we consider these within the context of the opinion, do you agree or disagree? Again, that is a judgment call that you need to make, and you have to determine whether or not the facts are convincing enough to get you to side with the author or not. When evaluating an argument, it's important that we avoid errors in reasoning. We need to be mindful of those potential errors in the author's reasoning in an attempt to persuade you to agree with his or her opinion. Now, these errors in reasoning may or may not be intentional. Sometimes the author may not fully research a particular topic before they reach an opinion and try to convince you of it. In other cases, the author may intentionally provide information that isn't necessarily true or could possibly be skewed to try to sway your opinion. In this lesson, we're going to look at the 4 most common types of errors, and they are the either-or fallacy, circular reasoning, false analogies, and loaded language. Let's take a look at each. The either-or fallacy is the claim that there are only 2 alternatives, when in fact there are several. So, on the subject of disciplining children, we are given this opinion. You can either spank your kids or let them push you around. Now, are these the only 2 choices for discipline? No, of course not. A simple Google search will show us that there are several forms of discipline that we can use. Positive discipline, which means just using praise in an attempt to get a child to make more positive choices. Gentle discipline, which is redirecting them towards positive behavior. Boundary-based discipline is where we set limits. Behavior modification is the process of using rewards to reward positive behavior and ignoring negative behavior. And then finally, emotional coaching is another form of discipline where we teach the child to discuss their feelings in a particular instance. The second error in reasoning is circular reasoning, and this is just repeating the same statement in different words. Let's take a look at an example about the importance of reading nutrition labels. Reading nutrition labels is important because you should know what is in the food you eat. Well, if we look at that statement, we will quickly see that reading a nutrition label and knowing what is in the food means exactly the same thing. In other words, what they're saying, reading nutrition labels is important because you should know that reading nutrition labels is important. Is that really a good argument? No. A better argument would be reading nutrition labels is important because it helps you make informed decisions about the food you eat. Here we are given an opinion about the importance of reading nutrition labels and given a reason as to why it is important. The next error is what is known as a false analogy. False analogies are a comparison of two things that are not really alike. So let's take a look at the statement on the subject of marriage. Being married is like being in jail. Okay, is marriage anything like jail? Well, I'm sure there may be comedians who will make that statement, but the reality is they are not at all alike. A better analogy would be marriage is like music. Both are playing different instruments and different parts, but as long as you're playing from the same sheet music, you can create something beautiful. Here, we have clear reasoning on why marriage and music, which at face value may not seem like they are alike, actually do share some similarities. And finally, loaded language. We learned a little bit about this in the previous lesson on bias. So just as a reminder, loaded language are words with strong positive or negative connotations. Here we see the statement, "The mayor is a moron, and this is the worst idea he's ever had." What do they want you to know about the mayor? Well, they're saying he has a bad idea, and they're calling the mayor a moron. But is that a good argument? Loaded language is used to conceal the weakness of an argument. So calling the mayor a moron doesn't explain why this particular idea is a bad idea. In order to discuss why this idea is bad, the author's opinion needs to have concrete factual reasons. Let's see if we can identify some of the errors in reasoning in this example. This neighborhood has gone downhill. Dealers sell drugs on the street and gunshots ring out every night. The police take an hour to respond. All politicians are lying hypocrites. Our kids don't feel secure because they don't know what it's like to feel safe. Our only choices are to move out or start carrying guns ourselves. The first sentence that sticks out is sentence 4, and it uses loaded language and a generalization. All politicians are lying hypocrites. Well, how could we fix this sentence? We could specify one or two politicians and then provide examples of lies. But we need to avoid using the word all in this case, because are all politicians lying hypocrites? What other sentences stand out as errors in reasoning? Well, let's take a look at sentence 5. Our kids don't feel secure because they don't know what it's like to feel safe. This is an example of circular reasoning. To fix this sentence, we need to provide a real reason that kids do not feel secure, or we could edit the sentence and move it after the first, because sentences 2 and 3 actually provide reasons why kids would not feel secure. We have one more error in reasoning in this example, and that is sentence 6. In this case, it is using the either-or fallacy. Our only choices are to move out or start carrying guns ourselves. Are those really the only choices? No, of course not. A Google search provided 3 other examples that we could use, 3 other choices that could help make the neighborhood feel more safe. One will be to start a neighborhood watch. Another example will be to pressure the police to patrol the streets more often. And then another thing that we could do is vote for government leaders who will invest in neighborhood protection. When you read, it's up to you to determine whether you agree or disagree with an opinion. So I encourage you to be good detectives. Evaluate the author's arguments and then make the judgment call about whether or not that those arguments actually work. To be an effective evaluator of an argument, you need to know and identify common errors in reasoning. The either-or fallacy, circular reasoning, false analogies, and loaded languages are the most common. With this information, you should be able to identify them and make better decisions about whether or not you agree with the author's opinion.